They thought 72 hours was a joke the day humanity erased an empire in every cradle, on every world that has ever looked up at alien stars. There is one sentence that every child learns before they ever learn to fly. It is printed in every schoolbook, etched above every diplomatic hall, and whispered like a ghost story in every bar from the core to the rim. Do not fire on a human vessel inside the 72-hour diplomatic window. Most species treated it like folklore, a quaint Terran eccentricity, a bureaucratic joke left over from when humanity was still considered promising but primitive. The Galactic Concordance kept the rule on the books because humans insisted, and no one wanted to argue with the species that had once glassed its own moon just to prove a point. The Krelvax Imperial Armada was about to learn why that rule is the only one in the entire Concordance Charter written in blood-red ink and underlined 3 times. The TCSV Endeavour was not a warship. She was a rust-streaked survey cutter barely 200 meters long, crew of 19, mostly graduate students and contract geologists. Her hull was painted the faded blue and white of the Terran Commercial Survey Corporation, and her only armament was a single-point defense laser meant for asteroids. On cycle 1142.7, while calibrating a new gravitic sensor array, she drifted 2 light seconds across an unmarked border that existed only on a map the Krelvax had unilaterally declared 3 centuries earlier. The Pride of Vaxthal, a Krelvax heavy frigate fresh from the shipyards, detected the intrusion. Its commander saw an easy kill count, a nice hollow for the brood clutch back home. Without warning, without hail, without even the courtesy of a targeting ping, it opened fire. 19 humans died in the first 30 seconds. The Endeavour's reactor scrammed, her spine snapped, and she began the long, silent tumble that ends every unloved wreck. But before her transmitters went dark, one last message went out on every civilian and military band for 50 light years. The voice belonged to Dr. Mara Singh, chief scientist, already bleeding from a head wound. Perfectly calm. This is Terran Commercial Survey Vessel Endeavour calling any human receiver. We have been fired upon without provocation by Krelvax forces. 19 crew. No survivors expected. You have violated the 72-hour protocol. You now have 71 hours and 58 minutes to issue formal apology and pay reparations. We recommend you start running. Then the channel went dead. Aboard the Pride of Vaxthal, Admiral SSKRYTH Vax, Supreme Fleet Commander of the 3rd Expansion Wave, laughed so hard he tore a gill membrane. He ordered the human wreck tractored in as a trophy to be displayed above the brood pool of his primary mate. That was hour 0. Hour 12. No fleet had appeared. No ambassadorial shuttle. No angry missive from the Terran Admiralty. Just a single human voice, female, mid-30s. Accent unidentifiable, repeating every 15 minutes on every frequency the Krelvax used. 60 hours remain. We are coming. Sensor officers logged it as crude psychological warfare and filtered it out. They should not have. Hour 24. Long-range telescopes registered the first anomalies. Thousands of jump signatures blooming like popcorn in a kettle. Then tens of thousands. Then hundreds of thousands. But they were not warships. They were haulers with welded-on railguns and hand-painted kill tallies. Colony arcs still trailing construction scaffolding. Deep space mining barges stripped of drills and packed with surplus missiles bought on the open market from whoever was selling. Passenger liners with every seat ripped out and replaced by torpedo tubes. Even a few antique generation ships that had been drifting, half forgotten, since humanity's first diaspora. Every single one broadcast the same synchronized countdown in perfect unison. 48 hours remain. Admiral SSKRYTH Vax ordered the fleet to maximum acceleration and formed a defensive globe. His strategists still calculated victory margins in the high 90th percentile. After all, these were civilians. Farmers. Merchants. Children playing dress-up in Daddy's spaceship. They laughed right up until the moment every known jump point behind them began to collapse. Human engineers had spent the last 24 hours seeding every possible exit with gravitic implosion charges. Micro-black hole warheads that lived for exactly 30 seconds and then erased themselves and everything within a light-minute radius. Silent fireworks of absolute annihilation. There was no way home. Hour 36. Trapped in a cage of their own making, the Krelvax watched the civilian swarm close to knife fight range. They opened fire with everything they had, planet cracker torpedoes, antimatter lances, exotic particle beams banned by 17 separate treaties. The humans did not dodge. They flew overlapping patterns no supercomputer in the galaxy had ever predicted. Patterns that looked like chaos until you realized every sacrifice was calculated to the millisecond. A mining barge would throw itself in front of a planet cracker so the colony ark behind it could survive 5 seconds longer and deliver its payload. A passenger liner would vent atmosphere to confuse tracking systems so the ore hauler beside it could get one clean shot. They died by the thousands. And every single one of them was smiling. Hour 48. The real military finally arrived. Not the polished diplomatic fleets the galaxy saw on parade days. These were the ships that had been quietly mothballed after the last war. The ones too old, too mean, too radioactive for peacetime service. Dreadnoughts that still had kill tallies stenciled on their prows from battles fought before most species had discovered fire. Frigates held together with actual duct tape and prayers. Carriers whose fighter squadrons were crewed by retirees who had answered one simple public bulletin posted on every human network. They heard our people. Bring whatever you have. Every captain was a volunteer. Every gunner had left a family behind. And none of them were in a hurry. The Krelvax fired everything they had left. Nothing reached the second wave. Hour 69. When the debris stopped bouncing. The once mighty Krelvax armada was a broken ring of burning hulls drifting in the dark. Only the flagship, Pride of Vaxthal, still had partial power, life support flickering. Shields long gone. Hour 71 and 59 minutes exactly. A single boarding pod, barely larger than a shuttlecraft. No markings except a hand-painted smiley face on the nose, clamped onto the bridge viewport like a metal tick. A white-hot cutting torch began its slow, deliberate circle. Inside the dying bridge, Admiral SS Gerwythvax, gills trembling, scales dull with blood loss, activated the galaxy-wide emergency channel one final time. His transmission is still required viewing in every military academy that isn't human. To anyone still listening, to every fleet, every council, every hatchling who will ever look at a star and dream of conquest. The 72-hour rule is not diplomacy. It is not tradition. It is a countdown. They do not send their admirals first. They send their civilians, their miners, their farmers, their children who just got their pilot licenses last week. And if that is not enough, then the military arrives to finish whatever is left. There is no fleet large enough. There is no fortress thick enough. There is no God merciful enough. There is only the countdown and the sound of human engines. Static. The viewport blew inward in a storm of molten glass and sparks. A human woman in a patched vac suit that had once been bright orange stepped through the breach as casually as someone walking into a corner store. She removed her helmet, shook out shoulder-length black hair, and smiled the calmest smile the galaxy has ever feared. Time's up. Behind her, a teenage pilot, no older than 17, acne still visible under the helmet lights, planted a small Terran flag on the Admiral's own command console. No victory parade. No cheering. No looting. Just thousands of human ships, civilian and military together, engines glowing soft blue, forming a perfect sphere around the dead flagship. Cold. Efficient. Final. A lone miner in an ancient exosuit recorded the scene on a wrist camera and sent one message home on an open channel. Job's done. Coming home for dinner. 6 months later, every starchart in the known galaxy carried the same update. A single red circle, hundreds of light years wide, labeled in every language the concordance had ever cataloged. 72-hour exclusion zone do not enter. Alien fleets rerouted around it the way ancient sailors once skirted the Bermuda Triangle. Trade lanes bent. Exploration missions were canceled. Entire species paid premiums to insurance brokers who suddenly specialized in human-adjacent risk. Because now they understood. Humans do not conquer territory. They remove problems. And once the 72-hour clock starts ticking, the only question left is how long you have to live.